I want to talk to you about preventing violence in your community. One way you can do that is being able to identify potentially harmful situations and intervene in them. This figure is the pyramid of violence. It's based on our understanding that in a completely equitable, hate-free society, people don't just get up and decide to murder or assault someone, or at least certainly not at the rates that we see in reality. Here's a quick example to track how bias becomes violence. Let's talk about slut shaming. The biased belief that someone expresses when they belittle someone for being promiscuous is based in the idea that people, most often women and gender minorities, who have lots of sex or are otherwise perceived as slutty, are worth less respect. When that idea is positively enforced, someone might feel comfortable making a joke or a comment about it. When that verbal expression is rewarded, the people around them are being told that not only is that bias correct, but they are allowed or encouraged to express it with their actions. Someone within that group might feel comfortable invading the space of a person they perceive as slutty and therefore worth less respect and autonomy. If then that action doesn't face negative consequences, why shouldn't they feel safe escalating? When we talk about violence prevention, a lot of people want to start by talking about physical expressions of violence, but I believe that we can make the largest scale changes by intervening in violence at its roots. Let's break this down. Biased attitudes and beliefs. Everyone has them. If you think you're the exception, no, you aren't. The simple fact is that we are all raised by people. People are fallible, and more importantly, are products of our environment. This isn't an indictment of you or your loved one's character. It would be not just unlikely, but practically impossible for someone to live their whole life in this society, one that does not just contain bias, but is actually structured around it, without having some implicit amount of bias. Racism, colonialism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and ableism are all examples of bias that is built into the system we live in and that we likely all have been affected by as we form our ideas of the world. Biased beliefs and structures can be difficult to spot and combat because they are so ingrained. Remember that example about slut shaming? Without further context, it can most easily be connected to sexism, but that's not the whole story. People's identities are intersectional, and the effects of bias are amplified for people with multiple marginalized identities. We can see the direct connection between bias and physical violence in tangible statistics. People of color, Indigenous people, trans people, gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, and disabled people all face extremely high rates of violence. When somebody makes a racist joke, uses a slur, or outright states bias, they are verbally expressing a power imbalance that is already present in our society. When people respond or are perceived to be responding positively to that, it's normalized. The person feels validated and backed up in their bias, and so do the people around them. Someone who experienced or witnessed that verbal expression being rewarded or even just not objected to might feel comfortable moving to a low-level physical expression of violence, thinking or knowing that they won't face consequences. If again, they are socially rewarded or even just ignored, they or someone else who can guess that they also won't face consequences may escalate that violence further. Let me be clear. I am not saying that anybody who makes an offensive joke is going to escalate to become a murderer. I am saying that when we create spaces where people don't face consequences for expressing bias, the people in that space notice. And a small number of those people will escalate that violence, and so forth on each level. So what can we do to prevent violence? Create consequences. Stop people from acting violence, all forms of violence, including things that we might be used to dismissing as not a big deal. I highly recommend bystander intervention training to learn more different ways to intervene in potentially harmful situations without putting yourself at risk. In the meantime, start thinking about verbal expressions. Call people out, especially your friends. If they don't understand how an offhanded comment can contribute to a larger culture of violence, talk about it. Odds are, even if they genuinely hold a deep-seated bias, they don't want their friend perceiving them as someone who contributes to harm. Take a look at your own biased attitudes and beliefs. Critically and honestly interrogate your positions and what social power you hold. Learn more about marginalized communities from people who are actually members of those communities. This doesn't mean go have your friend who seems to represent a marginalized community answer your questions for hours. If they want to, that's awesome, but odds are they have better things to do. Resources on all kinds of bias and discrimination are just a Google search away. Better yet, at OSU, you have the opportunity to take classes with accomplished scholars and activists, and to attend events that represent a wide range of cultures and backgrounds. Check out classes that expand your worldview. In particular, women, gender, and sexuality studies, African American and African studies, and disability studies will help you learn more about how intersectional identities reciprocally form and are formed by our world. Remember that you are a product of your environment, just like everyone else. You can take responsibility for your past actions or misconceptions without labeling yourself a bad person. The most important part is that you want to move forward, creating and allowing less harm. Okay, how's that?